Now, 2012 interpretations of accounts. I'm going to make this nice and short. The question looks at ordinary shareholders, performance, sale affairs, and prospects. Everything appears normal. The part C is actually quite simple as well. The gross profit percentage was 36%. Calculate the gross profit percentage for this year and give 5 different explanations for the decrease or increase, basically giving reasons why profit may go up or down. Gross profit percentage is given here at the top of the profitability. Sorry, gross profit percentage is here. Gross profit divided by sales. So in general, this question was actually quite basic. We have our normal 5 different formulas here. I'll go through the last one actually. Before I do that, there is one thing I do want to draw your attention to, and it's this. The box that we usually see usually shows us the ratios from last year. This one is the projected ratios for next year. So we have the figures for this year, and when we're doing the analysis, we're going to compare the figures for this year to the projected figures for last year. So usually we say earnings per share in 2010 was 5 cents, and in 2011 it's 6 cents. This is an improvement. Shareholders will be happy because ordinary shareholders are earning an extra 1 cent per share because shares have earnings per share have gone up from 5 to 6%. But in this case, we're going to say, because we don't have last year's figure, we're going to say earnings per share for 2011 was 6 cents, and they're projected to be 7 cents for next year. Again, shareholders will be happy. This is a positive trend. Earnings per share has gone up. So you are attacking it in the same way. It's just instead of talking about last year, you're saying, okay, this is this year, and they're projected to be this next year. Is this good? Is this bad? The part A doesn't actually differ in any way. First 3 are quite basic. The 4th one usually puts people off. We've seen it before. How long will it take one ordinary share to recover its value at present day payout? Well, that is our price dividends ratio. It's the years to recover value at present day payout. I've written that below as well. Some of these formulas, I've written things at the bottom. The gearing ratio is the same as debt to capital employed, just in case they ask it in an alternative way. So time in year to recoup market value of share at present payout rate, price dividend ratio. So share price divided by DPS, dividends per share. Working that one out is your share price divided by dividends per share. You just plug in those figures. But the last one is the projected market value of one share in 2012, which is to do with next year. So the projections for next year. And why I'm discussing this is because the projected market value is actually one thing that confuses people. It's not a formula. We've seen this before, but there is a way of calculating it, and it's using the P/E ratio. So if I'm to try to get the market value per share, which is this guy here, so in 2011 it was €1.15, 115 cents. If I'm to get the projections for next year, I am going to use the P/E ratio, because this is what the P/E ratio is. It's the market price divided by earnings per share equals years. Usually we have the market price at the bottom of the question. We can work out the earnings per share, and then we find what the P/E ratio is. But in this question, we're asked to get the projected market value for 2012. So for 2012, I have the earnings per share, which is this guy. And I have, because this is the price earnings ratio formula, I actually have the price earnings ratio, and it's 16 to 1, 16 years. So my market price essentially is going to be X, my earnings per share is 7, and my answer is actually going to be 16. So X divided by 7 is equal to 16. 16 multiplied by 7 works out at 112 cents, €12 cent. I'm drawing your attention to this because it's the projections for next year. And whenever you see market value, it's not a formula in itself. You just have to work off of the P/E ratio. You're given the P/E ratio, and you just plug in the other figures, and market price will be your X. Okay, part B. I've already kind of gone through it. What you would do. So usually you say, I'll quickly show you the 2019 one. Usually we say return on capital employed is this year, this was the last year, it has increased by this is positive, shareholders are going to be happy, so on. In this case, we can't compare to last year. We're saying this year, our return on capital employed is 7.35%. It's expected to rise because the projections of the return on capital employed are 8.1%. It is expected to rise to 8.1%. It hasn't risen, it's expected to. These are projections, projected ratios. It's expected to rise to 8.1%. This is, a positive trend, which I don't have in. Is a positive trend. So this return is above the return on risk creative 1 to 2%, satisfactory in the current economic climate, and so on. So this is actually quite similar to the rest of it. It's lower than the cost of borrowing, which isn't ideal, so that would be problematic. But the idea is here that I'm talking about, okay, this is this year, this is the projections for next year. This put a lot of people off in 2012. Hopefully people saw it, because if they didn't see it, then they would be talking about last year, and then they'd lose a lot of marks. But it shouldn't put you off, because instead of just saying last year versus this year, instead you say this is it this year, it's expected to be this next year. What does that mean? So dividend cover is 2.8, and it's expected to drop to 1.67. So dividend cover, we can also work out to be our earnings per share divided by the dividends per share. So 7 divided by 4.2 works out at 1.67. That's actually, it's a good thing I just kind of managed to spot that one there. So I've said that before, dividend cover isn't always given in these formulas. We can work it out here. Scrolling, oh, it's this one. So yes, we have it here, net profit minus preference dividend, or you can also work it out here of EPS over DPS. So if I go back to this here, my 7 divided by 4.2 works out at 1.67. So although this is my dividend cover this year, I work on my dividend cover next year to be 1.67. It's going down. This isn't good, because it's, it means that we're paying out too much of our profits as dividends. The rest of this year for liquidity, I mean, I'm doing the same thing again. This is liquidity this year. Next year it's expected to rise to 0.85, which is a good thing. They'd be positive, and so on and so forth. So gearing as well, we're given the gearing for next year, we're going to compare it. We're given the interest cover for next year, we're comparing it and saying again, this is the gearing or the interest cover this year, it's expected to rise to this next year. The market value of one share, we're not given the market value of one share at all, but we actually worked it out here. We can work it out because they gave us the PE ratio, and we have the earnings per share, so we did that in part 5. So we worked it out to be 112 cent for the market value for next year. So the market value this year was 115. Next year it's expected to fall. It's lack of confidence. It's concerning. Price earnings ratio we have was 12.3 years. Expected next year to be 16 to 1, which is, i.e., 16 years. Just to clarify, I got a question on that before actually. Why is the price earnings ratio, when it's called a ratio, why do we give it in years? And it's generally because we're looking to see how long it will take for our investors to basically earn their money back. It doesn't take months to earn money back, it takes years. So the 16 to 1, generally the answer you get for this is always works out at a yearly rate. So yes, it is a ratio, and you could say it like that, but it kind of makes more sense to an investor, and they'd prefer it to know, okay, the answer is in years in terms of how long will it take to make your money back, instead of saying 16 to 1, we're just going to say 16 years. It's the one formula that, even though it's called a ratio, you give it in years. Based on dividend payout rate, we had worked that out for part 4. It's, we're just giving the information here for 34.5. In 2011, the renewable energy, I have kind of the spiel that I've kind of given you for each and every one of the different sectors. And again, don't forget, at the end, the ordinary shareholder will be concerned with the performance, state of affairs in Glass. Concerned for future projections. Why will they be concerned? Because the market share has fallen. Its gearing is still slightly highly geared. interest cover's gone down a small bit, but it is kind of low, 3 times the interest cover, which isn't particularly great. Dividend cover is falling, too much of the profits are being given out. Return on capital employed is expected to rise, but it's too close to the cost of borrowing. So you're not making much money from profit over what you're actually giving out per year. So again, this is just kind of looking at it from the perspective of what we have this year versus projections for next year. Don't get intimidated if you see something like this come up in a question. You're already in the same manner. Instead of saying last year versus this year, you're saying this year versus next year.